What's up, you guys? Henry Gracie here at Gracie University, along with Victoria Gracie and Eve Gracie, to discuss some very important matters.
We wanted to share our thoughts on the big Me Too movement that is happening and the sexual assault survivors that have been coming out and taking a stand unlike ever before.
Now, even though this is taking place over multiple industries, the one that really hits home for us is the Larry Nassar case. He was the head doctor for USA Gymnastics, and he systematically sexually abused over 150 young girls over the course of 30 years. Now, many of the survivors of his crime are bravely taking a stand and testifying against not only him, but also the organizations that enabled him to commit these crimes.
As we reflect upon the severity of these crimes and the impact they must have had on the survivors and their families, it forces us to ask two questions. Number one, how was this possible to begin with? And number two, what must we do as a society to prevent this from ever happening again in the future? And it really boils down to three critical concepts that we want to address. And number one is to discuss and address the reality about sexual assault.
Yeah, when we say the reality about sexual assault, one thing in specific that we're referring to is what the Me Too movement has kind of exposed, which is the statistic that many people don't know. That is over 78% of sexual assaults are committed by people known to the target or the survivor of the sexual assault. And not only are they known to them, but oftentimes they can be people who are very well liked or people who have status in society.
Right, and the reason this is important to kind of recognize and to shine a light on is because stereotypically sexual assault, just to the general, especially what's publicized in the past in the media, is something that is conducted by a stranger, someone unknown to the target. They jump out from behind a car, a bush, an alley, they sneak into your house, and they carry out a violent crime against the target there. And when you categorize in your mind the sexual assault as being stereotypically that, the concern is that then if something happens that doesn't follow that mold, that stereotypical mold that you've painted and that you've kind of had painted in your mind over so many years, and something happens to you that doesn't fit that mold, you might question if what happened to you is even categorized as a sexual assault. And that's one of the great things about this movement, is that so many people are seeing that so many crimes have been committed by known strangers to the targets and the subjects there, and that's pretty powerful.
What's worse is that these known people are actually leveraging their position of power or authority over this situation to get what they want done.
Number two, eliminate the support systems, right? This idea of institutionalized sexual assault where the organization supports the behavior. What's crazy is in Larry Nassar's situation, it was reported that multiple times over the 30-year period, officials from USA Gymnastics and Michigan State University were made aware about the crimes that he was committing, but did nothing. And that, to me, is the biggest concern.
Yeah, and so the question is, how do we eliminate those systems that support this? And the first step to doing that, we believe, is believing them. So when somebody reports and somebody says that something has happened to them, the first thing that we have to do is take it seriously. And I think that there's a lot of reasons why people don't respond the way that you would expect, and that you would say, why wouldn't you report this to somebody higher, and why isn't this person taken out of this position? And I think there's two main things. One is either they don't believe them, right, the person who came forward, or they don't want to believe them. And there are many reasons they may not want to believe them. One, because it may not be convenient for the organization or the kind of entity, like for example with USA Gymnastics in Michigan State. Here's this doctor with this very high position, and if that's exposed, it makes the whole organization look bad, right? Not realizing that actually by addressing that sooner, that actually shows a supportive organization that takes care of their athletes.
Similarly in colleges, some people don't want to expose one of their main athletes because it reduces the success rate of their particular school, and it shows that they have a systemic problem there as well.
Right, exactly. So there are many reasons why they don't. Now, the truth is and the other thing about not believing them is that sometimes it's almost like they either really just don't believe them and they think this person is lying, or they believe that the behavior was borderline like acceptable. So they kind of think of it as like, well, this just happens, or that's just how he is, or that's just part of the business. And that's a problem of how this becomes systematic, right? Is because it's ingrained in the system that this kind of behavior is okay. So whether it's not believing them, whether it's thinking that the behavior is somewhat acceptable, or whether it's not wanting to believe them. And the other thing about not wanting to believe them is that sometimes these people, as we mentioned, are very likable. And they're actually people that a lot of people admire and adore. And so it's hard for them to actually believe that this person could commit this type of crime. And it's just really important to open your eyes to the kind of people who are doing this, and that no one is exempt from this. You know, essentially, if someone is reporting somebody committing these types of crimes, we have to take them seriously.
Which brings us to number 3. We need to empower our youth. We need to provide children with the tools and the critical interaction principles to navigate these waters and stay safe, ultimately try to reduce the likelihood of this type of crime being perpetrated to them in the future. And we understand that this conversation can be hard to have with children, especially your own if you've never had it before. So we wanted to lay the groundwork by identifying the 3 critical interaction principles that every child should be aware of.
Now, it's really important to understand that this talk is not just for girls. It is equally, if not more important, for boys to hear this. And that's for 2 reasons. 1, because boys can also be targets of sexual abuse, and they are targeted. But 2, because the more that boys understand this concept and these principles that we're going to discuss, the less likely they are to commit these type of crimes later on, and the more likely they are to respect people's bodies and their choices.
Right, and that's how you make a change over several generations, is you educate the youth and from both sides of this equation, which brings us to principle number 1. Status does not equal safety.
Yes, in fact, just because someone is in a position of power does not mean you can trust them. In fact, people who are perpetrators tend to use their position of power, whether it's authority, celebrity, teacher, instructor, they tend to use that and leverage it to their benefit.
Right, think about it this way. If someone is idolized to the point where they can do no wrong, they're perfectly set up to do as much wrongdoing as they want without being
Question.
Yeah, it's a free-for-all at that point. So the goal is to have healthy interactions and respect for people's accomplishments, but to be very cautious about what pedestals we put people on in terms of their accomplishments, and realize that they're humans. And just because someone has status does not in any way guarantee that they can be interacted with safely and with certainty, that person will not commit a crime. This doesn't mean to say that someone who has status will commit it. It just means that someone who has status is by no means exempt from the perpetrating these type of these heinous crimes that we're hearing about so much now in the media there. Recently, information surfaced about 3 jiu-jitsu black belts who own schools, actual businesses, but these guys have prior sexual assault convictions to their names. And David Arnenbeck, Scott Nago, and these guys, it's crazy because I've met 2 of these 3 men in my jiu-jitsu life. And what's crazy is on the surface, they're very good people and you would never assume anything. But the concern is that as owners of a business that puts them not only in very close proximity to people and children, but also in a situation where I know what high regard jiu-jitsu students place their instructors in, and I know how they idolize them, and I know how they admire and appreciate them so much. And that, we'll call it idolization of jiu-jitsu instructors, creates a very dangerous environment where these crimes can be recommitted by people, especially if they've already displayed that type of behavior. So it's very concerning that people with sexual assault convictions have schools that they're interacting with the public in this manner. And but unfortunately, jiu-jitsu is an unregulated industry, right? So anyone can open up a jiu-jitsu school and start teaching. Unlike other industries where someone with a prior criminal record cannot engage in that industry, it's not the case in martial arts. And I think a lot of general public people don't know that.
Right.
But it's very unfortunate and it's very concerning for situations like these. And what we do as an organization is we do thorough background checks on every instructor who comes through the organization. We've been doing it for 10 years now, certifying over 500 instructors, 150 locations worldwide, and we do background checks, and many people have been denied instructorship opportunities because of this. But that's only for the schools that we oversee. And it really boils down to each individual organizations of jiu-jitsu to, impose these mandates and these background checks to make sure that, you're not giving the power to a convicted sexual predator to engage with people and potentially perpetrate these crimes again.
And what's also concerning is not just those who have been convicted, because just because somebody, has not been convicted before of a crime like this does not mean that they aren't capable of committing.
Well, look at Larry Nassar's case. He wasn't a convicted sex offender when he became a doctor. He became a doctor, acquired that level of prestige by the organization, the people around him, and then he was able to perpetrate those crimes really uninterrupted for 30 years.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of, even parents, this is important to consider, that when your child is enrolled in a sport, right, they often have coaches. And especially for a parent who's really excited about their children's advancement in that sport, you are taught to think and to know that that coach is like responsible for everything. They're responsible for their growth. They're responsible for the spot they get on the team. So these coaches actually get a lot of power
And trust. They know
yeah, and
better.
trust. I remember a coach sitting in my middle splits when I was 6 years old, sitting on top of me. A heavy woman sitting on top of me in the middle splits at 6 years old. Like, that's abuse, you know? And because it's like, oh, it's your gymnastics coach and she's testing you to see how tough you are, if you're ready for the next level, you just kind of accept it and you think this is okay. But and for parents to recognize this, and that, you know, always make sure your child's safety comes before your want for them to exceed in this sport or to do whatever the coach tells them to do.
Yeah, the bottom line is, go ahead.
I know. Even coaches say, you don't look at your parents during this game. You look at me.
Right.
I'm the one. You talk to me. So they even create that separation.
Absolutely. And you got to really just balance that out, you guys, as parents. Bottom line, respect people for their accomplishments and their accolades, but don't idolize someone to the point where they can do no wrong. Which brings us to number 2. Your body, your choice.
Now, while in general we would like to live life giving people the benefit of the doubt and assuming that most people are well-intentioned, we still have to learn the ability to trust our own instincts and to identify behavior that makes us either feel unsafe or uncomfortable, and how to speak up about it, even if the person who is making you feel uncomfortable is a person of status.
In order for a child to feel capable of standing up for themselves, they need to know that their body is theirs to protect. In our households, we have a saying, my body, my choice. What that tells me and my daughter is that I can ask her to do something. If we're at a party and someone comes up and says, oh, hey, nice to meet you. I say, yeah, give him a hug. And she resists. I have to honor the fact that she doesn't want to hug somebody and say, okay, you don't want to, we honor that. And if I force her to hug someone that she doesn't feel comfortable hugging, now I'm telling her that your choices, your intuition, and your body is mine to have power over, and I'm going to force you to do this.
Right, that you don't have the power over you, the
Correct.
authority figure does. And I think oftentimes we, you know, parents in general want to tell their children, like, adults always know best, or adults have authority, or do what the adults tell you to do, what the teacher tells you to do, what whoever the person of authority does. Yeah. And essentially what you're kind of teaching them by assuming that all adults have the, you know, the ultimate say over everything, is that they have to trust them over their own feelings and their own gut. And so while, you know, as the parent, you obviously are the authority figure and you want to, you know, obviously have some boundaries with your child, but if you want it to be this like total authoritarian where the parents, the adults, everyone has the final say, so eventually that child is going to interact with other authority figures, potentially a malicious doctor or coach or, you know, law enforcement, whoever
An actor,
it might be.
Entertainment producer, anyone.
Yeah, anyone. And they will not have developed the resources to, first of all, identify that discomfort and then to actually address it.
And they wouldn't have been given the permission from we are the very first authority figure that they've ever had, their parents. And so if we say to you, no, you can say no to that. I trust your body, and that we're now empowering them at a young age to say, I can do this. But if we've diminished that at the beginning, it'll never grow again.
Yeah, it's not going to come back at 16 or 18 or 24. And the other thing to address is, we already mentioned this, but this talk is also really important for boys. Again, like we mentioned, not just to protect them, but also when boys learn at a very young age, no, she doesn't want to hug, so that's not yours to touch her. Or, you know, or you don't want to hug, so, you know, you don't have to hug them. But them learning to respect other people's space and their bodies, when that starts at a very young age, we're off to a really good start.
So the main idea to remember here is that even though our goal is to teach them interpersonal relationships and how to interact kindly, at the end of the day, it is still their body, their choice.
Which brings us to number 3, boundary setting for everyone.
Everyone.
When it comes to teaching children about defending against these predatory behaviors, I think there is no more important tool than boundary setting, right? Because boundary setting is how you reveal someone's intentions. Teaching children that if someone makes you feel uncomfortable in any way, shape, or form by something they say, do, touch, the idea is by setting a boundary and by letting that perpetrator know that you're made to feel uncomfortable, that you don't like that behavior, the perpetrator then has to respond. And how they respond is the most telling of their intentions.
Yes, oftentimes perpetrators either make you feel embarrassed or shame you for feeling resistant or having uncomfortable feelings. Like, oh, what?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah,
Oh,
they're master manipulators.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and when they're manipulating, oftentimes that's the first thing you do is question that boundary that you set or that it was inappropriate. And so once again, teaching your child how to really trust their gut and saying, no, I don't feel good about this, so I'm going to keep enforcing this boundary.
Right, and to teach them that how the perpetrator responds to that set boundary is the most telling of all, right? If they can set the boundary and the perpetrator manipulates it and flips it around and tries to make them feel bad for it, well, if you just think about it on the opposite side, a civilized, well-intentioned human being, if let's say you're touching someone, accidentally, but it makes them feel uncomfortable, and then she says, "Hey, I don't like when you touch me like that. It makes me feel uncomfortable," and I go, "Oh, I'm sorry. It was an accident," and it ends at that. That's the best indicator there that this might be a civilized, normal human being. But if might, not a guarantee.
Might.
But if she sets a boundary and the person goes, "Gosh, don't be so uptight. Gosh, what's your problem? I was just trying to give you a hug," and they flip it around like that, think about how that might be their very deliberate attempt to mask their true intentions.
Yeah, they're minimizing your feelings, they're shaming you for it, and embarrassing you in a way that makes you look like you're the crazy one.
Right.
And if children don't know that these type of interactions that these are the strategies that they use, and these type of interactions are possible, and that a boundary that is set can be responded to in different ways that are very telling of intentions either way, they just won't know. So these conversations have to be had, ideally, before the incident actually takes place.
And these can be role played. Like you can do role playing sessions with your kids about how to set boundaries, how to say no to somebody, what somebody might say in response, and how you respond to that, because these are very realistic scenarios that they are going to encounter in their life.
Including, how does it make you feel when coach says this? How does it make you feel when Uncle so-and-so says this? What can we do about it?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing is true for sure is that people are most likely to set boundaries that they feel willing and capable of enforcing. And that's where physical self-defense comes into the equation, and what we specialize in, and obviously we teach, and that, for sure for me, and I know for these ladies as well, the ability to say, "Hey, back up, you're not making me feel comfortable, stay right there," or any boundary set is exponentially multiplied by the confidence to know that should that boundary be crossed, we feel like we can defend ourselves against that aggressor.
And while we understand that when psychological manipulation and coercion is occurring, there's not really a physical technique answer to that necessarily. But the confidence that one gets from learning the physical kind of self-defense and having that kind of physical power, that's what gives them the confidence to, one, identify this potentially intrusive behavior, and two, to actually speak up to it, either directly to the potential abuser or to their support system, or to say something about it.
Absolutely. So there it is, you guys. Status does not equal safety in interaction. Your body, your choice. Doesn't matter who it is. And no matter what, boundaries against everyone to reveal their true intentions. We're having a free women's self-defense seminar ages 13 and up on February 24th. It's a Saturday here in Torrance, California, and several locations worldwide. We'd love to see you guys there. GracieGirls.com is where you can find information on the one nearest you. We'd love to have you there. 100% free. For kids ages 6 to 12, we have a bully-proof summer camp every year, the last week of July, where we discuss all of these principles and more. We'd love to have you there. We have several locations there as well. To find the location nearest you, go to bullyproofsummercamp.com. And finally, we'd like to extend the invitation to all 150 plus women who took a stand against Larry Nassar. We want to extend an open invitation for free training at any Gracie Jiu-Jitsu certified training center in the world. Yeah. Now, we understand that some of you will be ready to embark on this jiu-jitsu journey, and some of you may not be ready, and we respect that. However, we can say that even though nothing we're going to teach you will undo what was done, from a healing perspective, we've seen incredible results for the survivors that we've worked with over the last 20 years of teaching this program, and we hope to extend those benefits and those opportunities to you guys as well whenever you're ready.
So there it is, you guys. We hope that this was valuable to you. It's super important to us. And then, of course, we always hope that we get to see you on the mat sometime soon.
Thank you for your time. See you there.